So thank you very much, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's my true pleasure and honor to be here today to start and announce this webinar, which is done in conjunction between European School of Urology and European Urology. And I'm happy today to share this time with friends and colleagues, and of course with you all, with the idea of giving you some guidance, some tips on how to present and write and report the perfect abstracts. We all know that the deadlines for the major meetings are coming. And so I think we thought this could be a nice time slot and a nice time in the year to actually give some advices from an editorial point of view. And it's my true honor and pleasure to be again today with you, sharing this time with some of our associate editors here at European Urology. So I hope you can see my share screen. So basically, the webinar today is focused on the perfect abstract. And again, I think, and we think this important topic for several reasons. So I would like to start by thanking the editorial team of European Urology, which I have the honor to lead. And this has been now for more than 8 months. We now have, as of September 2024, a new cover, and of course, a new team, which I guess you know very well. So basically, when we think about, and this is, sorry for this slide change, and this in brief, the program of our webinar. And again, it's my pleasure to have you with us today, Laura Bucavina, who is actually one of the associate editors, who will tell us about how to write the perfect abstract. Rodley Dunn, who is actually one of the statistical editor, who is reporting on performing and reporting the perfect statistics. And then we have a pre-recorded presentation by our friend and social media and editor, Declan Murphy, on how to present the project in an impactful way. So basically, the question is, why presenting your research at international meetings? And this is due to several reasons. And the first of these reasons, of course, sharing knowledge. And it's important indeed that once we have a project to report, this should be done in a proper way with the key points and endpoints of advancing scientific progress, promotes evidence-based practice, of course, prevents redundancy, but also enhances credibility and trust. And of course, as we all know, these major meetings like the EAU has a lot of abstract presented, and on a scientific standpoint, what we want to present is the best of our research and results. The second reason why we should promote reporting our research at our major meetings is, of course, networking. And networking is not only interacting with people, but it's also staying updated on advances, collaborative research opportunities. Also, it's a major advancement for our careers and a way to exchange ideas and, of course, gain visibility in the field. It's not also only networking, but also is preparing ourselves to publication. Indeed, often, even though it's not always the case, abstracts are the first step to prepare the full manuscript, which will be submitted to the major journals. And when we present our research at meetings, what we have is a feedback, is a major constructive discussion about strengths and limitations on what we present. And of course, this is the first step to prepare our manuscript in order to actually highlight better what are the strengths and also the limitation of our research, thanks to feedbacks, inspirations, and eventually developing new ideas. Last, of course, we should consider this stage, which is major meetings, as a way to learn and improve our presentation skills. And presenting complex medical information is important for educating patients, but also in a way for our self-confidence in presenting our research to public and also to major audiences. So actually, when we would like to present abstract at our meetings, we should do in a proper way. We heard about that by our associate editors, but we should also consider this as a major advancement for our career, but also a major way we can improve the way we communicate, the way we do science, and the way we interact with people. So major advances for our careers. So having said this, my presentation is over. And of course, I would like then to introduce our first speaker. And I don't think she needs any introduction, but Laura Vucavina is a great associate editor. I have had the honor to have her with us at our team, and she will actually report on how to write the perfect abstract. So thank you very much, Laura, for being with us, and the floor is yours.
So hi, everyone. My name is Laura Vucavina. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I really want to just touch base on what we consider to be the perfect abstract. Now, perfect abstract really lies in the eye of the reviewer, but there are certainly a couple of things that you as a writer can do to strengthen your abstract and really make sure you have the highest chance of acceptance. And we'll go through some of the basics. There's a lot of things that are outside this presentation, but we'll cover the most basic parts for today. I am from Cleveland Clinic. I am a urologic oncologist, and as Dr. Briganti has said, I'm an associate editor for European Urology. So there's 4 C's of abstract writing that many of us have to understand. One, it has to be complete. So you have to cover the major parts of the project. It has to be concise. We know many of the abstracts are within 250 to 350 words. Give it or take a few if you're including a table or a figure. So you really don't have much room to say what you want to say as an apologies. If you want to say in your manuscript. However, within an abstract, you have to deliver the important information within 250 to 300 words. So being clear and concise are really important. It has to be cohesive. You have to be able to tell a story from where you started, how you did it, to where you ended up and where your results are. So really remember these 4 C's. Typically, it does not include the title as part of your character limit. So title is important as it's included usually. However, it's not part of the limit. The names of the authors as well. Citations are not part of the abstract, nor are references. Reminder for everyone to read their directions and proofread your abstract. Also have your mentor as well as multiple other authors read before you submit the abstract. And we'll talk about some of the other key features that you can do to eliminate the chances of rejection. The most commonly reason in order of frequency why abstracts get rejected is poor presentation of data. You might have the most incredible results, but if it's presented poorly, not cohesive, difficult to understand, then you're not going to have that abstract accepted. The discussion and the results have to be strong, and sometimes you have to interpret the data for the reviewer. So while you might be a knowledge expert in that field, you can't assume that the reviewer is a knowledge expert. So you have to be able to interpret the results for the reviewer. Lack of originality really stems to the beginning of the project and really has to do something with the original why you did it. We'll talk about more in-depth methodology and statistical analysis in the next section. However, really the results also have to be interpreted with caution. You can't overinterpret results and implication of your abstract. Another thing, it's too long, there's too much detail, it's all talk and no data. There's a lot of results will be discussed, the results are immature, and really sometimes it's just pure sloppy. So there's different types of abstracts. We all know there's abstracts within the manuscripts. However, today we're really going to talk about the presentation, meeting, and poster abstracts, which are the goal of this webinar. So it's broken down into 4 parts. The intro, which is sometimes called the background, the objectives. Sometimes it's just called introduction. The materials and methods, the results, and the discussion. The best way to think about it is why you did it, how you did it, what you found, and so what? You found this, now what? Now, the title, like I said, is not part of the abstracts in terms of the character limit, but the title says a lot about your research. And I strongly recommend for everyone to use what's called the declarative statement. So types of declarative statement is based on your results. Clinical trial of X for disease this. Clinical trial of this medication for this disease. Children with urinary tract infections treated with X drug. prostate cancer management with this drug. It's sometimes people include results within the title, and you have to be cautious because if the results are not strong and it's included in your title, that can actually turn the reviewers off and that could lead to rejection. So it's better to use a declarative statement instead of the results as part of your title. Don't be too assertive in your title saying X drugs improves overall survival in this disease. Instead, use that declarative statement where you use the drug in what population. The authorship is if you're presenting, you're typically the first. Your PI or your mentor should be the last. It's important to state that if you are the presenting author, sometimes you're not the first depending on the work itself. The format of the introduction and the objective is important. So like I said, don't assume that the reviewer who's reviewing your abstract is most knowledgeable in the field. Make sure you interpret the data. Don't use excessive abbreviation and actually avoid any abbreviations in the abstract itself. And generally, you don't need more than 2 sentences to explain the objective. For example, this is a copy of an abstract from GU ASCO. I outlined the introduction, the background of the abstract. You can see that it's pretty clear. They tested the hypothesis, so that's the aim of the extended lymphadenectomy, and they wanted to look at the survival differences, DFS and OS. This is 2 sentences, very short, straight to the point. There's no reason to talk about bladder cancer epidemiology, and there's no reason to talk about the value of lymph node dissection. You talk about the aim, the goal, and the hypothesis. Why are you interested in this question? The methods, we're going to have a whole talk about methodology, so I'm just going to go very briefly about this, but it's important to include just the basics, to not go into overextensive detail, but do understand that some information is necessary, including what's the study design, who's the study population, what was measured, what were you looking for in outcomes, and how was data analyzed. This particular part, how the data was analyzed, is only if the space is available. So don't go over in terms of what models you used, what covariates you used. Just focus on the basics, the study population, what you were studying, and what the study design is. An example of this is from a Contact 03. For example, look at the abstract. It's 3 sentences long. The population is outlined. The randomization is your methodology, and the endpoints are also assessed, including both the safety as well as primary and secondary points. So very, very short, straight to the point, not a lot of other statistical sort of methodology in the abstract itself. So let's move on to the results. The best way I have seen the abstract get rejected is overstating the results. In fact, somebody once told me, don't write like a urologist. We all think our abstracts are the best. We think our data is phenomenal. It's Nobel Prize worthy. In fact, don't overstate it. Just state what you found. The implications should also be based on the data. Do not overexpress or overstate your results. For example, this is another abstract from GU ASCO from last year, MSK cohort, simply stating the data. This is a number of samples that we have. This is the survival. This is the p-value. This is how we interpret it. In fact, if I look at this, this is a slightly longer results section that I would have actually probably wanted to, because the last sentence where they talk about the immune subsets, really, there's not much expansion on that data in the table or the figures that provided. So really that data could have been saved for the actual presentation and really does not need to be included in the abstract itself. Conclusion. So conclusion is the easiest part to write. It's 1 to 2 sentences, but it has to be key that you include implications of your work. What is the big picture? What is going on, and where should these results be incorporated? And what I mean by that is you're stating conclusions, for example, based on the previous abstract that we saw from the results section. They have restated their results briefly, saying that this mutation is associated with survival, and the implication is that it might serve as a potential biomarker. So quick, straight to the point. It does not drag on for 4 sentences. So just a brief overview, things to avoid. Do not use acronyms. Do not use abbreviations. Avoid rephrasing or restating the title is just a waste of space, so don't have to do that. Be careful about your writing. Reviewers are less tolerant of errors and clunky language and things that are short, unlike a manuscript. So 1 or 2 spelling errors could look sloppy, and that's one of the reasons a great abstract could be rejected. And these are my conflict of interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Laura. That was awesome. Outstanding presentation, really clear and to the point on how to write a perfect abstract. We will actually have question and answer at the end. So please feel free, all of you, to write in the chat any questions you may want to pose to our speakers. And so without any further delay, I will now leave the word to one of our statistical editors, Rodley Dunn, who actually will tell us on how to perform and report the perfect statistics, which, as we all know, is a key component of any research and also of any abstract. Please, Rod.
So again, welcome. Today I'm going to go over performing and reporting the perfect statistics, focusing on both abstracts and then on the ensuing presentations, hoping that your presentations will be accepted, your abstracts will be accepted. I have no conflicts to report. For statisticians, we care about a lot of the same things that every other kind of reviewer cares about with regard to abstracts. I really want you to tell me a story, and there's 4 key components. Why are you doing it? How did you do it? What did you find? And why should I care? I'm going to come back to that last point in a little bit. Abstracts are hard to write. They're capped, but we can turn some of that negative, those tight word limits or character limits, into a positive, because we don't have the room, we don't have the luxury of being able to include everything that we did. We can't include every decision that we did. We have to focus on only the main results. So it forces us to be focused and concise. And so if it's well done, it ends up being a very nice thing to read. So you're going to report only the main results. You're not going to report a ton of secondary analyses. You're not going to report sensitivity analyses. You're going to report only your main results and the corresponding methods that go along with those. And you're just going to have to be very judicious and not replicating within your abstract. Don't repeat definitions in multiple spots, just state them once. I'm a little bit more lenient for manuscripts. I want methods to be in the methods section. I want results to be in the results section, but I'm a little bit more lenient in an abstract due to the word limits. Sometimes we say we use this particular method within the results or vice versa. And I'm okay with that as long as there's some clarity. I also don't want to see replication between the results and the conclusion. And again, I'll touch on that in a little bit. One last point I want to bring up is don't worry about filling to your word or your character limit. We tend to feel so constrained that we think we just have to go to 1 word less than our limit or 1 character less than our limit. But sometimes just tell your story. And if you're 200 words or 200 characters less than your limit, that's okay. That's okay. And sometimes that might be a cleaner story to listen to. So the statistical editors of European Urology have given you a recipe or a playbook for how to do these. These are our statistical guidelines. There's 3 of them. This first one here, and with the QR code, we'll bring that up for you, is a guideline for not necessarily the doing of the statistics, how you choose which statistics that you do, but really focusing much of it on the reporting of the statistics. And then we have, this is from 2019, we have 2 more recent sets of guidelines, one for figures and tables here on the top, and then our most recent one from last year on causality. I would recommend that you read all of these. These are great for manuscripts, but they're also really good suggestions for your abstracts and your presentations. So I want to go through a few of our do's and don'ts for abstracts, focusing first on abstracts, then we'll move to the presentations. I have a slide like this that I give when we give a writing course for manuscripts. This is like an abstract. It's a slimmed down version of the list I use for that because you have to get right to your point. I think there's 4 main points that I want to see mentioned in an abstract in terms of the methods. What's your population? What was the data source that you collected and when was that collected? And then just tell me your primary statistical method. We don't need to get into every single thing that you looked at, just the primary statistical method that goes along with the primary results that you're going to present later. Don't arbitrarily categorize continuous variables. Clinicians love to categorize clinical variables. They dichotomize them, or they come up with multiple categories, but they're changing the form of a continuous variable. And this is a slide with a graph here showing that there are actual clinical implications in terms of patient care when you do that. Here it's showing that ED patients that go to the emergency department got tested less for heart attack if they were slightly below 40, which was a cut point in some set of guidelines, versus slightly above 40. Be very careful about matching your results language to the methods that you use. We'll see often if we're comparing group A with group B, we see words like increased. Increased doesn't fit. Increased means a change over time. When we're comparing two groups, if group B is higher than group A, that's not an increase, it's just higher. So just say higher or lower rather than increase or decrease. Unless you actually did use a pre-post test, then go ahead and use increase and decrease. With regard to the precision of results, some people feel like they are presenting things and they're more scientifically impressive if they're using a lot of decimals. Trust me, it's not impressive. So it's just unclear. We've been submitted a sentence here. This original is something that was actually presented to us, and it makes it seem like this experimental group and this control group are two different values, despite we're looking at a tiny portion of a week. I don't even know what this difference is. It's not very big, and certainly not meaningful. And the p-value, just way too many decimals. 0.7 is sufficient. So the alternative version just really cleans up this language, and you can see as a reader, the message really pops out now, and we can see that these two groups have roughly the same number of weeks, and the p-value shows that there was no significant difference. There's always a cost to adding a figure or table to an abstract. It costs you in terms of your word or your character count, but almost always I would suggest do it. It's much more memorable. It frames and highlights a wonderful way to highlight your most important finding. It will be, if you think of an abstract reviewer going through hundreds of abstracts, this is going to pop out. This is going to be the thing they look at, and it should be your most important finding. And what are you finding? Are you finding a difference between groups? Are you finding changes over time? And it's just a really effective way to do that. So earlier I gave these general rules for abstraction. You'll notice when I got to the conclusion, I didn't say provide a summary. An abstract is so short, it takes a minute or so to read. I didn't forget what you just wrote in the previous paragraph. So focus more on why should I care on the conclusion. So a conclusion should be two things. One, it should frame your results, not just restate them. And it should be strongly worded. So don't use soft words like may and might and can and could and similar. And you might say, oh, you know what, this is just preliminary data. This is a preliminary study. I don't have anything strong to say. Well, and I would argue back, if there is science that you are presenting, you always have something strong to say. You can avoid the soft words like may. So in this example, we found evidence that sham surgery may lead to worse outcomes. Don't say that. Say we found preliminary evidence that sham surgery leads to worse outcomes. So you can make a strong statement that's still staying true to the state of where you are. Here's a quick working example of what it's like from my perspective when I'm reviewing a set of abstracts. And so this is pretty typical abstract language, talking about some genomic analyses. They had looked for differences between groups. They had done some bivariate tests, the Fisher's exact test, and along with some p-values. They corrected for multiple comparisons. They used some other testing and some other stuff here. So I want to show you what I see, though. I think this language on first pass sounds good, but there's a few gotchas that I want to point out, and then maybe you can look for them in your own writing and avoid some of these. So this mentions continuous variables, but it doesn't state what those are. I would like to know what those are. So if they're not mentioned somewhere else, they should be mentioned here. And then it says these continuous variables were compared, but compared to what? Are we comparing between group A and group B? Are we comparing the variable to another variable? Make this a little bit more obvious. down here, the language says that they looked at some factors and genes. They selected them based on this criteria that I'll come back to in a second. And they say they were assessed, but assessed how? And I could look ahead and see that they were assessed using Cox proportional hazards, but that is not, that doesn't really tell me how they were assessed. Cox model is going to look at some time to event outcome, and there's no time to event outcomes that are listed in the sentence. So all of that needs to be clarified for me to truly understand what it was that they did and then the implications of their results. It mentions here at the end that they accounted for competing risk of death, but it doesn't mention what that is. And me as a reviewer, I would want to know what that is, because again, some of the framing and just to make sure that they handled their analyses correctly. And finally, they just used this arbitrary value of choosing genes that had mutated in at least 10% of the samples. I want to know a bit of just where that came from. It's an abstract. You're not going to have a lot of words for that, but at least let me know if it was selected a priori or if you just decided later on to choose this many genes. So I want to move on to now the presentation do's and don'ts. One biggie is don't stick your entire abstract on a slide. Other people do this terrible thing of sticking an entire poster on a slide. Don't do that either. This is a mess. No one's going to read this. There's really no point. The second is don't list your key methods without details. Some of you may push back on this one. This uses as an original example that the Kaplan-Meier method and log rank test was used for time to event outcomes. That's not really telling me anything. What are these time to event outcomes? Was this the appropriate approach? And my suggestion is kind of mesh that in with some of the sentences around it, hopefully. So hopefully you can still save some time by combining it with the sentences that occurred before or after, and say something that now is a lot more understandable, that we can look for differences between, say, surgery and radiation groups, and we're going to look at them in these two outcomes, overall and progression-free survival, and that's going to be assessed using the Kaplan-Meier method and tested using the log rank test. It's a little bit longer, but this original sentence, I would argue, is not saying anything. It's just a method. It could be from a textbook. You need to be careful about clarifying what your numbers represent. So we have this box that a patient is more likely to receive delayed treatment, and they use it as one example that older patients, they write median 67 versus 62 with a p-value. But what are 67 and 62? And I could spend some time and think about this, and I could go, okay, the people receiving delayed treatment were older, so the bit larger age value is probably delayed treatment. 62 is probably the other one. But people are skimming through abstracts, both the reviewers and the readers, if they're going through your poster session or looking through their abstract book to figure out what talks they want to go see. They're looking through these things quickly. They're not going to take a minute to interpret your numbers. So just make sure that you can clarify. And we can add just a few additional words that will really strengthen how these appear. So my alternative is just to say median. It's great that they included the metric. Often they don't. So the median for the delayed group is 67. The immediate group is 62. And here's the p-value. So it's just a small change, but it makes it a lot more clear. Here's another example of a test. A box of results that's presented. The problem with this, though, is we might present bivariate results in this way, where estimated blood loss is just compared between groups A and group B with some particular p-value, and I'm not considering any of the other variables, or these might be the results that we see in the model. It's unclear from this form of the presentation. So that language about what methodology is driving your results needs to be clear somewhere, either in the reference in the text or in the header to this table. I would strongly argue for presentations, lean towards figures over tables. Tables are very information dense, and generally we don't want information dense presentations. There's too much to take in. People tend to only remember 2 or 3 things from each presentation. So these ideas butt heads a lot. And we'll also have, with regard to tables, we've all been in talks where people say, hey, I know this table's hard to read, it's too small, and then they try to point our eyes into a single number, or they try to just tell us the overall message. But don't present the table like this in the first place. Present the smaller table, present the message, do it in a different way. just copying a large table from your manuscript and sticking it in your presentation is not good for anybody. If you do have to include a table, minimize. So this table at the top, which you're going to quickly look at this and you're going to see kind of a lot of numbers, everything's a little bit smaller. And this table at the bottom, these two tables actually have the exact same information, just the table at the bottom is a lot cleaner to look at. If we have our two groups of information, I do not need an overall category, so that's been eliminated. If I have a dichotomous variable, if I know the percentage for one group is 67%, I by default know that the other group is 33%. So I can get rid of the other side of a dichotomous variable. And so I've done that for those variables. I've gotten rid of the overall. I've cleaned up some of the false precision that I have, and I make a table that's a lot easier to ingest quickly and decide what this table means. Figures are very important, as I mentioned, but you have only a little bit of space in the presentation. And more importantly, you only have a little bit of time for the people who are viewing your presentation to figure out what is it that you're trying to say. So keep those ideas in mind as you're trying to put together a really clear figure. If you're doing them right, to make an effective figure, an independent person who's not familiar with your work should be able to look at that figure and correctly summarize that figure in 1 to 2 sentences. So you can test it out. You can find a smart person that you know, or just somebody at your life, it might be your partner at home, and say, hey, what do you think this means? If they can summarize it correctly in those 1 to 2 sentences, it's probably an effective figure. So I wanted to quickly go through some examples. This we see a lot, Kaplan-Meier with some other dashed lines for some confidence intervals. This is ugly. It's not really terribly effective. There's a table in here. Everything is quite small. This is a different table that's really great for a presentation. It doesn't have a legend box. It just sticks the nice verbiage right next to the line. So it's very clear to see what pattern is happening within these 4 groups. This is another example of something to maybe avoid. People will use these colors that represent, again, a confidence interval around these plots. To me, it looks like a toddler got a box of crayons and just drew. It's not clear. It's just a blob. It's hard to pull out what the message might be here. And this is a significant p-value if you're wondering and you're going to argue, oh, these 4 lines just overlap, and this is showing that they overlap. These authors are making the argument that they don't. And it doesn't have to be a ton of color, and it doesn't have to be all that hard. This is a wonderful figure that's in black and white that I think is highly effective. It's very clear. I can quickly figure out, we're looking at 4 different smoking groups. I can figure out what is my outcome and what is my explanatory variable age. And this just really gets their message home very clear because it's so nice and clean. There's a lot of other considerations to consider. I don't have time to get into those today. Look through some of the guidelines and look through some of the other resources on the web, and we can help answer those questions for you later. Thank you for your time.
So thank you very much, Rod. It has been, as always, a fantastic presentation about the ways we should report statistics, and sometimes we do, being urologists, make mistakes in reporting and interpreting our results, and you made this very clear. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Declan Murphy, our digital media editor. He's a master in delivering a fantastic presentation, so there is no other person better than him that actually can report to us how to present in the best ways our research and projects. So I would kindly ask to have his video started, and then Declan, I see him online, so he will be also available for question and answers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GUcast studio here in Melbourne. My name is Declan Murphy. Alberto has asked me to speak to you today about how we can take our research project to the widest possible audience by using modern communication tools, not just the traditional tools of scientific communication like posters and papers and presentations. We need to use the tools that we use in the rest of our daily lives, especially social media tools, to take our research to the widest possible audience. And that's what I want to speak to you about today. For sure, the tools that we all use every day in our own lives to communicate with family and friends and be entertained are also tools that we need to be using more and more proactively to disseminate our research to the widest possible audience, and indeed to learn about other people's research. And that's what I really want to speak to you about today. The background to this is that it's no longer good enough to be a great clinician researcher, a great surgeon scientist, a great academic urologist. We also need to be masters of communication, magnificent messengers, and supreme storytellers, or at least have some element of these core communication skills. Because so much research is being published, even if you get accepted and published in a really good journal, it's still possible all of this will be lost in the sea of other publications that are coming out all the time, every month. So we need to use these tools to help communicate our findings, and that's what we want to focus on today. The background, of course, to this is that traditional ways of receiving news are changing dramatically, especially among younger populations. What you see here, moving from left to right, is what older people tend to use when I count mine in that age group, tend to get our news from. So print, radio, TV still dominate. And for social media in blue here, you'll see that older people only get a minority of their news from social media. But what if we look at younger people? Look at this. You'll see that younger people, certainly people younger than mid-20s, the vast majority of them get their news from social media, and this is increasing. So what this means is there's a generation of people coming through who will be urologists, who will be working in healthcare, nurses and industry and so forth, who have never got their news from traditional sources that we got our news from. And that's very important when we think about how we communicate our findings. So there are three key technologies I want to speak to you about today that I think we need to use more because of this change in the way news is being digested by people. The first is in imagery rather. Here's a nice infographic that we prepared for a randomized trial we published in The Lancet in 2020. And infographics have become a very popular way of communicating complex information. It's very easy on the eye. We all like seeing something presented in a visually simple format, and that's what an infographic is. But you can present a whole randomized trial, as we do in this image here for the Pro-PSMA trial. And indeed, when I am presenting work like this, I will often just walk through the infographic to explain everything from background to trial design to results and conclusions. Similarly, in the lutectomy trial that we published in European Urology earlier this year, we presented a nice infographic in a social media format, and I will often use things like this infographic to present the findings of this study. Because guess what? The younger generation coming through are very used to digesting this type of information in a visual format like this. Now, that you might say, right, that looks very complicated and I don't know how to do an infographic, or you're paying graphic designers a lot of money to do that. That's true for these cases here. But of course, the gig economy, like the way it's disrupted transportation and things like Airbnb, has also moved into content creation. And I use both Canva, which is a great source for motion graphics and presentations, and particularly Fiverr.com, which is a great place to access content creators. If you need a logo or a brochure or an infographic or anything visual designed, video editing, audio editing, podcast production, you can go on to Fiverr.com and get it very, very, very cheap. $20 or $30 will get you a very significant amount of work that here in Melbourne might cost $500 or $600 otherwise. So I encourage you to, when you're presenting something the next time, if you don't have time or ability to do an infographic yourself, have a little fiddle around in Fiverr and see what you can get. So this stuff is no longer beyond all of us. The second area we want to talk about is video. And this has been a great initiative of Alberto Briganti's since he took over the journal earlier this year. We've created these beautiful little short form animated videos. Every month in the journal, we will post between 2 and 4 of these short videos to summarize key papers. So the authors are not having to do this. It's the journal who take responsibility. And Alberto has a great team of people working with him at San Raffaele in Milan who create these graphics and animate them. The authors don't have to do anything. And these are really, really popular, I can tell you. We're getting a huge number of downloads on this. They're very social media friendly. They look great on Instagram and TikTok. And I think this is a format that the younger generation coming through will be expecting, because this is the way in which other forms of content and media are being communicated through social media. So short form animations and videos are very important. What about the era of virtual presentations that COVID forced upon us, but that certainly still remain? Even for webinars like this, it's all too often, of course, that we're either doing it live, using Zoom like you see in this video here, or we've been asked to pre-record it using Zoom or using PowerPoint. Now, these invariably look like this. You've got the vast majority of the screen being taken up with a PowerPoint slide, and then a very small thumbnail in the corner. And this is not very visually pleasing. I think this type of video I'm speaking to you with today is more visually pleasing because it looks more like a conference. You've got a more appropriately sized video and so on. And there are some tips, even if you're just using these normal things, that, get the angle of the camera right. Don't have the camera looking up your nostrils or pointing at the roof. Make sure you have good audio. You can get away with bad video, but you cannot get away with bad audio for these. And lighting, get the lighting right as well. But I would encourage you to think more broadly, because the younger people coming through are obsessed with short form video. So if you're asked to create a video for a presentation or a conference, you could instead make a proper video. Use video editing software. Use many of the online AI video editing solutions that are out there. Here's a talk I did for the EAU during one of the COVID conferences. And instead of just pre-recording on Zoom or PowerPoint, I shot this with a video camera and a teleprompter. And instead of using PowerPoint, I used motion graphics like you see here, because this is more visually entertaining for people. How did I do that? I did this one using a green screen. It was actually in this room before I built the studio. And then I used a superimposed video shot from the hospital where I normally work at Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre. You can see I'm using a teleprompter there, and the green screen gets replaced later on in the video editing. So these forms are very popular, and you certainly stand out from the crowd if you stand up and you've made a nice video like this. And of course, you can chop it up into nice vertical videos for Instagram and TikTok. Here's another one I made. This was when I was on vacation in Queensland, a place I go every year with the kids in the summertime. And I was asked to make a video, so I brought a drone with me. I brought a gimbal. I brought a teleprompter. Yes, these are the sorts of things I sometimes do on holidays. And I was sending this to a conference in Europe. It was about avoiding obsolescence as a cancer surgeon. But again, this is a way more entertaining format for that audience if they see something like this. So it can be worth the effort. And if you are someone who is interested in communication, or you want to stand out from the crowd, have a look at these types of examples and think to yourself, yeah, I could do that. There's video editing software on my computer. Drones are cheap, or borrow a drone from a friend, and they can be a very effective way of communicating. The final one I wanted to speak about is about podcasting, which is something I have a lot of personal interest in. Lutectomy, when we published this in European Urology, we also published a podcast to go at the same time with myself and first author Renu Epen, who you see here, and Michael Hoffman, a nuclear medicine physician at Peter Mac. And therefore, we want to use something like a podcast to draw attention to this trial that we had just published, because a lot of people may not go to European Urology and download the paper, but they might listen to a podcast when they're out for a walk in the morning or when they're doing some exercise or whatever. So podcasting can be a really powerful ancillary to your publication or to an educational thing. It doesn't have to be a paper. It might just be a tutorial topic while people are preparing for exams, or it might be some life lessons. So we believe that podcasting is an important tool, because the growth in popularity of podcasts for the rest of society, listening to sports podcasts or politics or true crime, can also be paralleled in scientific podcasts. And our podcast has been running since 2020. It's had about 75,000 audio downloads, and YouTube is growing very, very quickly for us. I looked at this today, so we've had over 50,000 views on the GUcast. I saw 1,000 views a day, basically, coming into GUcast, going back to the 150 or so episodes we have. And then, of course, European Urology also engaged us this time last year to start creating some podcasts for this family of journals. So that's what we've been doing over the past year as well. We've created a podcast channel. One channel, just go and search for European Urology Podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and you'll find us. And you'll see content there coming from 3 out of our 4 journals and from the 4th journal shortly. So I encourage you, when you are thinking about publishing a paper and so on, is to think about how we're going to look at that. And we will take your paper and we will create a podcast. We'll get you on our podcast to talk about this. And yes, we've also grown very, very nicely. I looked at this data today, 9,000 downloads over the past 12 months for a channel that's just starting. And this is very gratifying to see because this is an extra dimension. I want to finish by talking a little about short form video, short videos, because this is the revolution in news for younger people nowadays. My kids will never sit and watch normal YouTube even. They want to watch YouTube Shorts, but in particular, they want to watch TikTok and they want to watch Instagram Reels. So the growth in TikTok and Instagram Reels in particular is revolutionary. And these are leapfrogging over traditional social media sites because short form video is so popular. So we, therefore, in the scientific communication field also need to be getting ready for this. And it is quite disruptive, of course. You're seeing new influencers. This is a US urologist called Annika Ackerman. And this is a few months ago. She had over 200,000 followers, 5 million likes. She has many more now. She's very clever at the way she uses TikTok. She just uses it to show easy, simple things that she sees every day, like how to do a prostate biopsy, how to fiddle with a kidney stone. And you'll see on these nice videos she makes like this, she's getting hundreds, thousands. This is like 7,500 comments on this TikTok video. So these can be a very, very powerful way of reaching a very large audience who are searching for simple things like kidney stone. They're not searching in Google anymore. They're searching in TikTok and places like that. This is a medical student who's got 600,000 followers, 600,000 followers. And here she's posting a video on a model showing how to pop in a catheter. And you can see like 2.5 million likes on this video, tens of thousands of comments and so on. So this is revolutionary and it's only going to grow more and more and more. So yes, we of course are getting into TikTok and all the other short form videos as well. This is myself and Renew earlier this year celebrating our 4th birthday. Here in the studio, we'll post short form videos like this. This is me promoting a conference highlight video where we were dressed up for a disco theme. This is perfect for short form video. And here's Renew promoting a whole bunch of podcasts that we've been making for our friends in China, part of an initiative that we've done with one of our sponsors on GUcast. So this is new for us. We've only started doing these types of short form videos recently, but I think it's very important as a strategy to engage the next generation. So as I say, it's all about the messaging. So we need to be better at communicating with these more popular new formats coming through, especially things like podcasting, infographics, short form videos like video animations, the European Urology Spotlights, and in particular, Instagram Reels, TikTok, and so on. We're probably going to use them to drive people towards our longer form content like papers in the journal, podcasts, webinars and stuff like that. But we must do that because as you can see, the size of the audience in these short form videos is absolutely huge. So yes, great that you've had a publication, but it's going to get lost unless you use these tools to get it out to that next generation that are coming. So that's really all I wanted to talk to you about today. I think for many of you watching this who are already in that generation, some of these content creation skills will come quite naturally to you. For those of us who are older, who are in the higher echelons of these journals, we need to engage with the younger generation who know how to use these tools. And that's very much part of our philosophy at GUcast and in European Urology as we develop these formats more. So we would love to hear from you. If you have ideas about how we should be using these tools better, do reach out and get in touch with us. You can just search European Urology or GUcast. It's very easy to find me. And thank you very much again for inviting us to speak to you on this webinar. As this is going out live, I will be, I think, on a train going from Paris to Bordeaux, having flown up from Melbourne to get to the EROS meeting. So if I can dial in for the discussion, I will.
So thank you very much, Declan. This, as always, very innovative and a lot of good tips and new ways indeed of communicating science. I don't know if Declan is online now. I actually know that it's on his train, on his way to Bordeaux. But anyway, thank you again for this great presentation, and I'm sure we learned a lot. As actually, I did learn a lot from also Laura and Rod presentation. So. Declan, can I start with you? If you have time now, 15 seconds, just quick question. Give us 3 tips on how to best present when you are on the stage presenting your abstract at the meeting. 3 tips to be effective and straightforward to the message.
My first tip is it's very important to practice, Alberto. And I think especially if English is not your first language, so understandably you will be nervous. Practice, practice, practice. Not just that, but make a video. Just get your iPhone or your computer and make a video of yourself. 2 reasons for that. One is you will get better. You will see something that will make you think, oh, if I just move my hand, you'll get better. And second, you will get more confident. I think that watching yourself do a presentation and play it back will give you a lot more confidence when you stand up in the real room for people. That's my first tip is practicing and preparing. The second is, if you think of the way you like to hear a presentation, I like to hear stories. I like when people tell me a story. And so if you have a style that means you can include, for example, a case. Here's a lady with this large renal mass and who's had this scan and the other scan. And then at the end of the presentation, you come back to the lady again. So that's a good storytelling example of people using something at the beginning and the end. And I've gone on for more than my 15 seconds, so I'll stop with those 2 tips. And Renu is with me, so she was learning as well and says hello.
Hello, Renu. Thank you very much for being with us today, and welcome again. And have a nice meeting in Bordeaux, by the way. Fantastic city and fantastic meeting. So thank you so much. Can I just indeed instead make a couple of questions to Laura and Rod? So we do have a question from one of our attendees saying, asking whether there is indeed some guidelines recommended or some literature recommending that you may recommend asking for how to write the best abstract. Is there anything available? I know that online many tips and many instructions can be found on Google, but is there any kind of text or publication you may recommend, Laura?
So to Declan's point, I think there's lots of great videos, which is the best way to learn. You have to be specific when you look for these articles to see what kind of abstract. So if you just go on YouTube and you look at best scientific abstract tips and tricks, lots of great videos. Publications from, at least from the American side, there's American College of Physicians. There's also from AACR, so more of the scientific basic science abstracts. They have short, about 2-page recommendations about abstract size, what you should include. But like I said, I would start with YouTube, see if you pick up some tips and tricks, and then go on to the more dense material.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Another question which I have for Rod this time. So in many times, urologists actually report not actually prospective randomized trials, but rather retrospective evidence, which anyway have important implications for practice and also for future trials, so for generating new hypotheses. So one of the mistakes we may do is when you do a multivariable model is to overfit, right? So to actually reaching not unreliable conclusion just because we put too many variables in the model. Any tips or suggestions or recommendations on how to avoid this overfitting of our models?
Yeah, thank you, Albie. It's an important issue. Overfitting is a problem. It's very easy to get statistical answers with any test in any model. And sometimes you can keep making changes to make your model run. You initially might get some errors, and then you can keep making some tweaks to make it run. But that doesn't mean it's going to be reliable. There are some base level guidelines on models that you should have 10 observations per covariate that you're including in your model. That's for linear regression models. For something that would be for dichotomous variables like logistic regression, it's not the overall size of your data set, it's the smaller of the two. So if you have an outcome where you're looking at progression, let's say, and say fewer people progress than don't progress, you might look up how many people progressed and then use that as your guide, and you could have 1/10 of that as the number of covariates in your model. That is going to be an extremely low bar. So another thing that you can do in your models is, as you're adding more variables, there should not be huge dramatic shifts in the parameter estimates. So there's ways of looking at that to see the impact of what you have. And there's a few other more complicated approaches. I would encourage you to do some Google searches online, but please think about this issue. It is very important and something we want to avoid. It's going to impact the reproducibility of your results.
Quick question. We have 3 minutes left. Again, for you, is it necessary to report in the abstract, or is suggested to report in the abstract the descriptive characteristics of the population, or we should, rather skip that and report only, for example, key variables in the results section of the abstract?
The answer is probably it depends. I earlier had said focus on your main set of results. The question would come down to, if somebody was looking at your presentation and you used a particularly unique population that differed from what others might typically have, that might be worth mentioning. Maybe some of your key covariates, whether that's age, whether it's your exposure variable, maybe mentioning the distribution of those. I don't think you need to mention the distribution of everything. That can wait for the presentation and for the manuscript. But some of the key variables, I think, should be handled in the abstract.
Thank you, Rod. There is actually a question for Laura about the tool that she used to make her presentation. I don't know, but generally speaking, let me just make it a bit more general. When you present your abstract, are you using animations and other forms of ways of highlighting your main results or not?
I'm not a fan of animation because depending on the software and computer, a lot of times the animations just don't work. Videos, animation. I'm more simple. I like to pick a theme, pick a color, and stay within. I don't like sloppy copy and paste tables or charts. So I just answered in the chat. One of the things that I like is called slidemodel.com. And you're able to use a lot of the pre-populated templates to present your information. Saves a lot of time. The AI-based PowerPoint is not quite ready for prime time, in my opinion. It just looks too clunky. It's not quite there yet. So but I have been using slidemodel.com. The other thing I have been using similar to Declan is Fiverr. Another third sort of outsourcing is called Upwork. So if you have a complex figure or a visual abstract that you like to use, you can use either Fiverr or Upwork to help create that for you. Takes a lot of work away from you doing it, which takes hours, as we know.
Excellent, thank you. Since we are going towards the conclusion of the webinar, let me just ask you something which I find very interesting in your presentation, Rod, which is related to the conclusion section. In other words, your message is don't be shy, and you can use like strong wording when you do your conclusion if your results allow for that. So can you please elaborate there a little bit more, because I found very interesting.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, don't overstate your results. I think Laura mentioned that in her talk. Don't overstate your results. I'm not looking for that. So it's not being overconfident. It's just correctly stating what it is that you found. If there is a reason that you should be presenting your scientific results, then tell me that reason. You don't have to overstate them, but you also don't need to softball how you're doing it. Just use proper language. Don't use those soft words, and just tell me straight out, what did you find? Frame your results and tell me why I should care.
Excellent. I think this is actually a great statement and a great conclusion indeed of our webinar. And I hope that we have been able to give key messages on some important aspects on the way we report science, especially when we have to do that in a short way like abstract. And nowadays, as you know, at meetings, it's mainly a matter of giving short communications rather than long communication as far as spontaneous research is presented. Last question was about how the best abstracts are chosen during meetings. Usually there is a committee, at least that is how it happens at the AU, and the best abstracts are selected based on scientific merit among all those presented and by a specific committee within the Scientific Congress Office. Having said that, thank you again so much. I would like to thank again all the speakers, Dr. Rodley Dunn, Dr. Laura Bucavina, of course, Dr. Declan Murphy, EAU and the European School of Urology, and of course, the European Urology family of journals for this great opportunity to speak today to this in this webinar. Thank you again, and I hope you learn from these fantastic presentations and speakers. Thank you again.